The evacuation orders are there only as a pretext to allow Israel to carpet bomb, to indiscriminately bomb a whole area non-stop. So my colleagues on the ground have been saying that since last week, the intensity of the Israeli bombardment is the largest they've ever seen in months. There's basically an airstrike every other minute. There's non-stop artillery fire, gunfire, machine gun fire, as well as Israeli quadcopter drones that are swarming Gaza and shooting people at random. My friends and family on the ground tell me that once the starvation gets too severe, it dulls your senses. It sort of shuts down your brain. An empty stomach means an empty mind. And your basic survival instinct forces you to march like a zombie towards these distribution centers, only to get shot on the way. The chances of survival there are very slim. So the overall picture is just a genocide.
In northern Gaza City on Monday, an Israeli airstrike bombed a popular seaside cafe, killing at least 40 people. The Al-Baka Cafe was a popular destination for Palestinians in Gaza looking for internet access, including journalists. Photojournalist Ismail Abu Hattab was killed. Palestinian journalist Bayan Abu Sultan was injured in the attack. Also among the dead was prominent visual artist Franz Al-Salmi and a group of children celebrating a birthday. Al Jazeera journalist Hani Mahmoud reported the attack on the cafe occurred without any warning, he said. At least 95 people in Gaza were killed Monday. Separate attacks hit a tent encampment in the courtyard of the Al-Aqsa Hospital in central Gaza and the Yafa school, which have been sheltering hundreds of people. Israeli forces killed at least 15 people seeking food in southern Gaza at a militarized aid distribution site run by the U.S. and Israeli-backed group, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. 50 others were wounded. This is Hassam al-Hawadri, an eyewitness.
Hunger, hunger, hunger. No matter how much I tell you hunger, there is hunger in Gaza. There is humiliation. This is humiliation. You bring me aid to kill me. You said this is aid and it is documented and signed. Then why these massacres? These people had gone to eat. They went to get a morsel of food to eat. They said they were distributing aid. How do you call it aid, then you shoot at people's children? Where is the world? Where are the people? You tell me aid and it's documented. Then why do you kill us?
More than 600 Palestinians have been killed while attempting to seek aid from the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites. Already, at least 66 Palestinian children have died of acute malnutrition due to Israel's blockade. That's according to Gaza officials. For more on these latest developments in Gaza, we go to Gaza, where we're joined by Dr. Abdul Basit Khan, who is a neurosurgeon volunteering with Rama Worldwide at the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. He's an American doctor volunteering in Gaza right now. Thank you so much for being with us, Doctor. I understand just before we went to air, there was another bomb right near you?
Thank you, Amy. Yes, in fact, there were 4 bombings just south of the Khan Yunis complex while we were joining the phone call. These are residential areas, indiscriminate bombing, and I'm sure after this call, I'll go treat the patients in the emergency room.
And Dr. Khan, some of the patients that you've been treating, could you talk about the injuries they're suffering?
Yes, definitely. So I'm a neurosurgeon. I treat brain and spine pathologies. That was just another bomb. I've been treating mostly blast injuries. My patients are all dislocated and living in tents. They are being indiscriminately bombed by the Israeli occupation forces. My first day here, within 2 hours of arriving, I operated on a 10-year-old girl who was in her tent and was struck by a bomb. Father said he was outside of the tent. A bomb came from the sky. She became immediately unconscious. Came to me. She had shrapnel going through both, ripping through both frontal lobes. I operated on her that night. Thankfully, she's doing well. These types of bombings affect entire families. I was later consulted on an adult woman in the ICU who had shrapnel penetrating the front of her neck, causing a large neck hematoma. I was consulted by the head and neck surgeon because there was shrapnel lodged in her spine. That woman turned out to be the mother of the patient I had just operated. The poor father is here going between both ICUs. These kinds of conditions and these kinds of scenarios are very common. In fact, just before I logged into this call, I took care of one young boy, 8 years old, similar story. In the tent, he has shrapnel ripping through both frontal lobes. We will soon operate the patient as soon as we have an operating room available. Everything is in resource limitation in Gaza. Then later in the emergency room, I took care of his father, who also had shrapnel injury to the back of the head. These are the kinds of patients I'm seeing.
A few days ago, Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, reported that Israeli soldiers, IDF soldiers that they've interviewed, said that they were ordered to fire on unarmed crowds near food distribution sites. There have been over 500 Palestinians killed since May at these food distribution sites. What are your other colleagues talking to you about the kinds of people who have been killed or wounded by gunfire at these distribution sites?
It's an excellent question. The injuries from the aid sites are very common, and we're seeing these injuries every single day. I myself, yesterday night, we had a patient come from the aid site in a delayed fashion after he was struck with shrapnel in the back of the head. The day prior, I had seen a 25-year-old man who had a single gunshot wound with a high-velocity rifle, entrance in the posterior aspect, back of the neck. They shot him in the back of the neck and then exited the front part of the chest. It severed his spinal cord. He can no longer move his arms or his legs, and he will remain like that for the rest of his life. He's only 25 years old. I reviewed with my colleagues the cases that they're seeing. One of the cardiologists here, he saw a patient who had been shot in the chest at the aid site. Had blood collecting around his heart, preventing his heart from beating. They had to emergently drain the bleeding from around the heart. One of my colleagues is an orthopedic surgeon. Yesterday, he amputated 3 limbs of different patients, young, healthy civilian patients, just seeking aid. And as you can imagine, that's very morbid to lose an arm or a leg. My other colleague is a urologist. He took care of 3 patients yesterday who were all separate patients shot in the scrotum. 2 he operated on, and 1 he is managing conservatively. The one he's managing conservatively is a 7-year-old boy. A 7-year-old boy was with his father in the aid station and was shot in the scrotum. And unfortunately, one of my colleagues, the cardiologist, saw a patient who was dead on arrival. 7-year-old boy was shot, multiple gunshots at the aid station. So these cases are very common.
Just to be clear, the medical charity Doctors Without Borders is saying that this Israeli-U.S. food distribution scheme in Gaza is degrading Palestinians by design, forcing them to choose between starvation or risking their lives for minimal supplies. With over 500 people killed, nearly 4,000 wounded while seeking aid. MSF says, Medical Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders says, this scheme is slaughter masquerading as humanitarian aid and must be immediately dismantled. Dr. Bassel Khan, you're a doctor. I know you can't talk about politics here, but you are seeing what's happening right there on the ground. Are your patients, those that are conscious, talking about having gone to get food?
Yes, so usually it's the young adult men that are going to get the food on behalf of the family. But like I said, even 7-year-old boys have gone with their families to attempt to get food. Beyond the patients, it's not just the patients, Amy. Even the doctors here are suffering from starvation. There's minimal food available. No one in Gaza is eating meat. I haven't seen one person eat meat since I've arrived. I'm talking to my neurosurgery colleagues who are native Palestinians living here and working here in Gaza. Their situation is very dire. One of the colleagues told me he lost 50 kilograms, that's almost 100 pounds, since the start of the occupation and the war. Food insecurity is rampant from all levels of society, from the poor to the, even the physicians are not eating. And this stretches to the patients as well. The 10-year-old girl that I mentioned, we operated on her the same night she came. Thankfully, she had a good neurological recovery. The next morning, I wanted to start her with tube feeding so she could get some nutrition to recover from her injury. I talked to the pediatric ICU doctor, who is a Palestinian native, who lives in Gaza, has been working here for the entire war. He said, yes, I agree with you. We should give the tube feeding, but it's not available. There is no tube feeding in the pediatric ICU for the 10-year-old girl in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. It's not available.
Finally, doctor, you are an American doctor who works in Houston. You're a neurosurgeon. What is it like to be there at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis for you? Does anything in your life experience compare?
No, definitely this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life by far. I have been following the occupation since the beginning, and you read about the devastation, the destruction, the humiliation, the hunger, the starvation, the death, and it just does not do it justice. Everywhere you look, the hospital is overcrowded. Families are living in the hospital. The supplies to do the operations are limited. The Israeli forces will not allow you to bring such supplies in. We're using single-use items, for example, drill bits and such tools that you're supposed to dispose of after each use. They're not available, so we cannot dispose of them. We're reusing them and attempting to sterilize them. The operations that take me maybe 45 minutes to 1 hour in Houston are taking me 2 to 3 hours here in Nasser Hospital. Nasser Hospital itself was a victim of bombing. There's no windows in Nasser Hospital because they've all been destroyed. There's no windows, meaning the bugs come into the hospital. All of the operations I've done in the operating room, because there's no air filtration system left, there are bugs coming into my operating field. This situation is so dire and so unacceptable. I'm totally flabbergasted. At the same time, I have to really respect and recognize my Palestinian colleagues. I've only been here a short time. My Palestinian colleagues, the neurosurgery team here, they are themselves displaced from the European General Hospital, the European Gaza Hospital. They each have been relocated more than 7 times each. The doctors are living in the tents, but they still come here. Every other day, they take 24-hour calls, 2 teams. They have not been paid salary, and they have been managing these patients with such little technology, such little tools, and they're managing them to a very high degree. So I really respect and admire my colleagues here. And no, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my whole life.
Dr. Abdul Basit Khan, thank you so much for being with us, neurosurgeon volunteering at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, speaking to him in Gaza. Although the Israeli military, the Israeli government, Netanyahu, the prime minister, does not allow international journalists to cover on the ground what's happening in Gaza unless they are embedded, you can see it is not difficult to speak to people on the ground, and you should call the networks and ask them to do that. It is absolutely critical to understand what Dr. Khan is saying. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.
Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, when bombs fall over Israelis and Palestinians, not everyone has a right to safety.
Those who are the most affected are the people in Gaza, because this is precisely what Israel wants. It wants to continue this genocide in the dark.
What does this moment reveal about who is protected and why Gaza keeps slipping from the headlines? I'm Manuel Rapalo, and this is The Take.
My name is Diana Buttu, and I'm a lawyer based in Haifa.
Diana, welcome back to The Take during these trying times. Recent global headlines have been focused on Iran, they've been focused on Israel, but you've written, "Don't take your eyes off Gaza." Paint the picture for us that you think our audience needs to understand right now.
So let me back up a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
There was a ceasefire agreement that was signed back in January of this year. And the ceasefire agreement was supposed to last. And then on March the 18th, Israel then broke the ceasefire and started bombing Gaza again. And what then happened was the combination of Israel breaking the ceasefire and Israel not allowing aid to get into Gaza, not allowing food and fuel and medicines, etc., led to a lot of international condemnation, including by Europe, which hadn't been condemning Israel up until that date. So as one of the means of diverting attention, Netanyahu decided that now was the time to then go after Iran.
Israel's bombing campaign on Iran was both relentless and systematic. The stated aim was to destroy the country's nuclear program, but also with a view to weakening the Iranian government.
And that was one of the reasons that he attacked Iran, because he was internally losing his coalition. And he was starting to get a lot of criticism for not only breaking the ceasefire, but also starving Palestinians in Gaza. And so sure enough, by bombing Iran, he managed to do a few things. One is he managed to divert attention away from Gaza, and he managed to get his coalition back intact. So today, with the war now over, the war that is between Iran and Israel, we now see that Netanyahu is riding on a political high, and indeed, nobody's paying attention to Gaza. We've seen that just during this period, the 12 days that Israel was bombing Iran, that Israel managed to kill 850 Palestinians, and nobody was paying attention to that.
Diana, you're speaking to us from Haifa, which is one of the cities that was targeted by Iranian missiles as part of that retaliatory attack by Iran after Israel's attack on Iran. One of the strikes, one of those missiles, it's my understanding, hit near your home.
Yep.
And one of the first people that called you was a friend of yours in Gaza. Can you talk about that moment?
One of the missiles not only hit close to my home, it's actually just meters away from where I'm speaking to you now and where my office is. And it was a message that I got from a friend in Gaza. And this is a person who has been displaced. He's been evacuated 11 times. He's living in a tent. Many of his family members have been killed by Israeli bombs. He's desperate for food. And his was one of the first messages, and his message was, and it still sits with me to this day. His message was, "Are you okay?" And the reason that it still sits with me was because I just kept thinking about him. And I kept thinking about the things that I have. You know, we have sirens here. We have an app that warns us. I have a protective space in my own home, because my home was built after 1990, and by law, any home that was built after 1990 has to have a protected space. There are public bomb shelters in the city of Haifa, and yet here is the person who doesn't even have a home any longer, and who's been forced to flee 11 times, and he's asking about me. And that really struck me, that it should be the other way around, that all eyes should be on Gaza and not on us in Haifa. But I also want to be clear that my situation is unlike the vast majority of Palestinians, because Palestinians inside Israel make up about 20% of the population. But in the city of Haifa, we're only 11% of the population, and it's because we're such a small percentage of the population that we get all of the amenities that I was mentioning, the public bomb shelters and so on. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority of Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship don't live in the big cities. They live in their own big cities. And in their own big cities, there aren't public bomb shelters because the state has never built them. And so they're actually quite vulnerable. And then Palestinians who are in the so-called mixed cities like Haifa, etc., There have been a number of reports where Palestinians have been kicked out of these public spaces or not allowed into these public spaces.
Yeah. Well, let's zoom in a little bit. Earlier this week, Al Jazeera reported that the overall Palestinian death toll in this 20-month-long war on Gaza has surpassed 56,000 people. Among those killed are hundreds of people who are seeking aid from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's a controversial Israeli, U.S.-backed distribution program. It's the organization that has now taken over aid distribution for Palestinians in Gaza. More than 400 Palestinians have died at these humanitarian aid sites. It's my understanding now, I read this recently, that there's a new term for Palestinian victims called aid seekers, or those awaiting aid. These are the people that have been killed while waiting to be fed.
And it's so sick that you have people who are going to try to get food, a bag of flour, and they're gunned down. And as you said, there's been over 400 of them. And we knew that this was going to happen.
This was the warning. This was the warning from international observers that this would happen. What we've seen since day one, the chaos of people rushing to and visibly being corralled in those images.
So the way that aid delivery is supposed to work is that aid is supposed to go to the people who need it. It's not supposed to be that people who need it come to the aid. And what this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which there's nothing humanitarian about it, has done, is that they've only set up for the entirety of the Gaza Strip only 4 distribution sites. And you have to ask yourself, well, where are these 4 distribution sites? These 4 sites coincide precisely with the areas that Israel wants ethnically cleansed. So if you are from the north, you have to walk some 25 kilometers to get to one of these distribution sites. And the whole point is that you're then going to have to make the decision. Do you want aid? Do you want to be able to feed your family? Or do you want to stay on your land? And this is the calculation that they're forcing people to make. And so in that process, in addition to just having the 4 sites, by the way, there used to be 400 sites when it was distributed through the proper UN channels. So compare 400 sites to now 4 sites. When you have it brought down to this small number, along the way, not only is there chaos, but there is deliberate chaos because the Israelis want to make it so that it becomes a treacherous route just to be able to get to that aid. So that you then you become corralled into these spaces where the only place that you can be is on a very, very, very small part of the Gaza Strip. As it stands now, 80% of the population of the Gaza Strip is on less than 20% of the land of the Gaza Strip. It shows you how much they have ethnically cleansed the Gaza Strip. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has been one of the tools for this ethnic cleansing process, because what they aim to do is to use aid as a function to get people to come down to these distribution sites. And if you don't come down to these distribution sites, then you can be gunned down. And so we see that again, the choice that people are being forced to make is, do you starve? Or do you risk trying to get some type of food and be gunned down there? And in the process, of course, it's not as though the bombs have stopped. The bombs are continuing as we speak.
More with Diana after the break. So, Diana, let's back up a little bit, Diana, and talk a little bit about that disparity, again, that you were mentioning before, because Israel is a country that has been preparing for years. It has long prioritized military preparedness, readiness for war. We can point to the Iron Dome, Israel's missile defense system, bomb shelters in homes. That's a really interesting point that you make right there, because not everyone in Israel is safe.
No.
When the bombs drop. Talk about that. Like, who is safe and who isn't? Who has the right to safety?
Well, the problem with Israel is that they think that they can come up with technological solutions for what are fundamentally political problems. And that's why they come up with these silly things like protective spaces or bomb shelters or Iron Dome or any of that stuff. And if anything has been shown during this past war, this past attack on Iran, is that all of it is for nothing. The Iranian missiles managed to avert Iron Dome, as did the Hezbollah stuff. Not only that, some of the people who were in their bomb shelters actually were killed because the missiles landed right in there on top of them. So none of this is all just a panacea. It's just something that psychologically makes you feel as though you're safe. But if you go down even further and you ask the question as you did, which is a great question of who is safe, I can tell you that who is not safe is Palestinians. And I can explain why. Like, for example, Palestinian homes predate the establishment of the state. My own home in Nazareth was built in 1955. And so therefore it doesn't have a bomb shelter. The entire city of Nazareth doesn't have any public bomb shelters. So as everything was happening with Iran, a city of 80,000 people, 80,000 Palestinians, there were no public bomb shelters. And again, this is deliberate. Places like Tamra, where it ended up being that 4 Palestinians were killed, they don't have any public bomb shelters. There are 37,000 Palestinians who live in the city of Tamra, no public bomb shelters. And yet the Israeli town of Mitzpeh Aviv, which is just about 1.5 kilometers away from them, has a population of 1,100. They have 13 public bomb shelters. So this is all to say that the people who are not safe are Palestinians, and this is deliberate. This is absolutely deliberate.
So how is that? I mean, that's the question then, right? Why is it that Israel has failed to build these public shelters for everyone to be safe if and when the bombs drop? And I can point to a video that I saw recently. It's this video that's been circulating online that shows a group of foreign nationals in Israel being denied entry to a bomb shelter. Mm-hmm. You know, this is happening during the retaliatory attack by Iran, but these are very telling images about who is allowed and who is not allowed to go into these shelters.
It's because Israel's a racist state, and it's gotten to the point where they're actually kind of proud of their racism. So it's not just the people who are. It wasn't just the video that you saw. There've been a number of videos where Palestinian men were denied, where a Palestinian was denied access, including by some of the patients in a hospital shelter. Where there's just been so many of them. It's a racist country, and the reason that they don't build shelters in Palestinian towns is because it's a state that operates on racism, and it doesn't feel that it needs to provide any assistance or any bomb shelters to Palestinian cities and towns. So it's layers of racism that exist in the country. It's a country that's founded on racism. It's a country that's founded on the idea of Jewish supremacy.
Diana, you recently wrote an article for Zeteo where you titled the article, "It's Not Just Netanyahu, a lot of Israelis want genocide too." In that article, you argue that genocide fever is how you phrase it, has taken hold of Israeli society. You're pointing to a recent poll that shows a majority opinion in support of Palestinians being expelled from Gaza. I want you to talk about that poll specifically, what that data reveals to you, and also what it's like, given the fact that you live in Haifa, what it's like living with that reality, not just as an analyst or as a lawyer, but as a Palestinian.
Oh, where do I begin? So first I want to be clear in saying that this isn't just about public opinion polls, but this is enshrined in their laws. And it's enshrined in their nation-state law, where they say that there are superior rights for people who are Jewish than others. So this isn't just a question of polls, this is a question of actual laws. But I want to get into the polls. Mm-hmm. This was a very interesting poll that was conducted not too long ago, I think back in March. And there were a number of figures that are important. The first is that 82% of Jewish Israelis believe in the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza. And that should be very alarming. But the poll didn't just focus on Palestinians in Gaza, because that's bad enough. But they also focused on Palestinians inside Israel. And 56% supported the ethnic cleansing of people like me. People like me, people who are citizens of the state. And then the fascinating thing is that of those who are under the age of 40, the number jumps even higher.
I was going to ask you about that specifically. It's this idea of young people's views, because there's almost an expectation that when we're talking about younger Israelis, that they may be more progressive or have, stronger empathy for their Palestinian neighbors, but there's even stronger support for ethnic cleansing among younger Israelis.
Absolutely. And that's the scary part. Their views are very much along the lines of just get rid of the Palestinians, period. And there's a reason for that. The only way that they can continue to look at themselves in the mirror is through the dehumanization of Palestinians. Because if they don't, then they have to look at themselves and acknowledge that they committed some major crimes.
How does that number get that high? 82% of Israelis support expelling Palestinians from Gaza. How does that look like in the media, on social media, on TV, in the education sphere? Because these are the ways that type of narrative can become most prevalent. But can you talk about what it actually looks like?
Yeah, I want to talk about two things. So I want to talk about on the side when it comes to Gaza, and then I want to talk about what it's like living here at Haifa. So on the Gaza side of things, it's the result of years of dehumanization. So you just hear constant propaganda, analysts who never speak to people from Gaza or never speak to Palestinians, period. And then you're surrounded by all of their propaganda day after day after day. And one of the things that's fascinating is the billboards that exist in the country. You see signs like billboards and bumper stickers. One of the most popular bumper stickers is a bumper sticker that reads, "Finish them." Another bumper sticker that's really popular, and actually billboard, is one that says, "Together we will succeed." And there's never a definition for what success looks like. What is success? Flattening Gaza? Bombing 36 hospitals? Starving Palestinian kids? Killing 56,000 Palestinians? Like, what does success look like? But that's the way that you just see this level of propaganda.
Do you see any sign that any of this is changing into a positive direction?
No, and I'll explain why. Especially with the attack on Iran, because you saw all of Western Europe and Canada and the United States go alongside Israel and agreeing with Israel's attack on Iran, Israelis feel vindicated. And the latest polls are showing that 82% of Jewish Israelis supported the attack on Iran. So when they are so empowered and they're told by Western Europe and they're told by America and they're told by Canada that this is the right thing, there's no way that this is ever going to turn into anything positive. They have been told that they can continue to kill, They can continue to starve, they can continue to maim, they can flatten Gaza, they can do whatever they want, and they can ethnically cleanse us because they can do no wrong.
And that's The Take. We really want to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What did you think of the discussion? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be reading through. See you tomorrow.
Why does the United States so strongly support Israel? In this video today, I'm going to be explaining the geopolitical and economic reasons why Israel is such an important part of U.S. foreign policy and Washington's attempt to dominate not only the region of the Middle East, but really the entire world. And for this analysis today, I had the privilege of being joined by the economist Michael Hudson. I will bring him in later to provide further details about this topic. But first, I want to highlight some very important basic context to understand this relationship. It is crucial to stress that Israel is an extension of U.S. geopolitical power in one of the most critically important regions of the world. In fact, it was current U.S. President Joe Biden back in 1986 when he was a senator who famously said that if Israel didn't exist, the United States would have to invent it.
If we look at the Middle East, I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel. I am with my colleagues who are on the floor in the Foreign Relations Committee, and we worry at length about NATO. And we worry about the eastern flank of NATO, Greece and Turkey, and how important it is. They pale by comparison. They pale by comparison in terms of the benefit that accrues to the United States of America.
First of all, it goes without saying that the so-called Middle East, or a better term is West Asia, has some of the world's largest reserves of oil and gas, and the entire global economy, infrastructure all around the world relies on fossil fuels. We are moving toward new energy sources, but they are absolutely critical to the entire global economy. And Washington's goal has been to make sure that it can maintain steady prices in the global oil and gas market. But this is about something much bigger than just oil and gas. The stated U.S. military's policy since the 1990s, since the end of the Cold War and the overthrow of the Soviet Union, is that the United States has tried to maintain control over every region of the world. This was stated very clearly by the U.S. National Security Council in 1992 in the so-called Wolfowitz Doctrine, and the U.S. National Security Council wrote very clearly that Washington's goal is to preclude any hostile power from dominating a region critical to our interests, and also thereby to strengthen the barriers against the reemergence of a global threat to the interests of the U.S. and our allies. And the regions it specifically named were Europe, East Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East/Persian Gulf. And the U.S. National Security Council warned that if a foreign power controlled the resources of such a critical region, it could generate a significant threat to our security. Then in 2004, the U.S. government published its national military strategy, in which Washington stressed that its goal was full spectrum dominance. Quote, the ability to control any situation or defeat any adversary across the range of military operations. Now, historically, when it came to the Middle East, the U.S. relied on a so-called twin pillars strategy. The West pillar was Saudi Arabia, and the East pillar was Iran. And until the 1979 revolution in Iran, the country was governed by a dictator, a Shah, the monarch, who was backed by the United States and served U.S. interests in the region. However, with the 1979 revolution, the US lost one of the pillars of its twin pillar strategy, and Israel became increasingly important for the United States to maintain control over this crucially strategic region. It's not just the massive oil reserves and gas reserves in the region. It's not just the fact that many of the world's top oil and gas producers are located in West Asia. It's also the fact that some of the most important trading routes on Earth also go through this region. It would be difficult to overstate how important Egypt's Suez Canal is. This connects trade from the Middle East going into Europe, from the Red Sea into the Mediterranean, and around 30% of all of the world's shipping containers go through the Suez Canal. That represents around 12% of the total global trade of all goods. And then directly south of the Suez Canal, where the Red Sea enters the Arabian Sea, you have a crucial geostrategic choke point known as the Bab al-Mandab Strait, right off the coast of Yemen, and there more than 6 million barrels of oil go through every single day. Historically, the United States has tried to dominate this region in order to maintain control not only of energy supplies, but also to ensure these global trade routes that the entire globalized neoliberal economic system is built on. And as US influence in the region has weakened with an increasingly multipolar world, Israel has become increasingly important for the United States to try to maintain control. We can see this clearly in the discussions over oil prices through OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which has essentially been expanded, and it's now known as OPEC Plus, to include Russia. And now Saudi Arabia and Washington's arch-enemy Russia play a key role in determining global oil prices. Historically, Saudi Arabia was a loyal US proxy, but increasingly, Riyadh has been maintaining a more non-aligned foreign policy, and a very big reason for that is that China is now the biggest trading partner of many of the countries in the region, and for a decade, China has been the largest importer of oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. Furthermore, through its global infrastructure project, the Belt and Road Initiative, China is moving the center of world trade back to Asia, and in the Belt and Road Initiative, the road in particular is a reference to the New Silk Road. Can you guess which region is absolutely crucial in the New Silk Road and the Belt and Road Initiative? Well, of course, it's the Middle East, or again, a better term is West Asia, and that term actually much better explains the geostrategic importance of this region because it connects Asia to Europe. And this also explains why the United States has been so desperate to try to challenge the Belt and Road with its own attempts to build new trade routes. In particular, the US is trying to make a trade route going from India into the Persian Gulf and then up through Israel. So in all of these projects, Israel plays an important role as an extension of US imperial power in one of the most important regions of the world. That is why Biden said back in 1986 that if Israel didn't exist, the US would have to invent it. That's also why Biden repeated this in 2022.
We're also going to discuss the ironclad commitment, and this is, I'll say this 5,000 times in my career, the ironclad commitment the United States has to Israel based on our principles, our ideas, our values. They're the same values. And I've often said, Mr. President, if there were not an Israel, we'd have to invent one.
And even as recently as October 18th, 2023, Biden once again repeated the same thing in a speech he made in Israel.
Long said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it.
In that speech in 2023, Biden traveled to Israel in order to support the country as it was carrying out a brutal bombing campaign in Gaza and ethnically cleansing Palestinians as part of what many experts around the world have referred to as a textbook example of genocide. Top United Nations experts have warned that the Palestinian people are in danger of genocide by Israel, and the United States has steadfastly been supporting Israel because, once again, as Joe Biden said, Israel is an extension of U.S. imperial power in West Asia, and if it didn't exist, Washington would have to invent it. Now, on that note, I'm going to go to the interview that I did with friend of the show, Michael Hudson, the brilliant economist and author of many books, including Super Imperialism, the Economic Strategy of American Empire. Here's a brief clip from our conversation.
Israel is its landed aircraft carrier in the Near East. Israel is the takeoff point for America to control the Near East. The United States has always viewed Israel as just our foreign military base. When England first passed the act saying that there should be in Israel, the Balfour Declaration, it was because Britain wanted to control the Near East and its oil supplies. And then after that, of course, when Truman came in the military immediately saw that it was America was replacing England as the chief of the Near East. What we're really seeing is having fought Russia to the last Ukrainian and threatening to fight Iran to the last Israeli, the United States is trying to send arms to Taiwan to say, wouldn't you like to fight to the last Taiwanese against China? And that's really the U.S. strategy all over the world. It's trying to fuel other countries to fight wars for its own control.
Michael, thanks for joining me today. We are speaking on November 9th, and the latest death toll in the war in Gaza is that Israel has killed more than 10,000 Palestinians. The United Nations has referred to Gaza as a cemetery of children. More than 4,000 children have been killed. That's about 40% of the casualties are children. And the United States has continued to support Israel, not only diplomatically and politically, not only by, for instance, vetoing resolutions in the UN Security Council that call for a ceasefire, but furthermore, the U.S. has been sending billions of dollars to Israel. Not only the $3.8 billion that the U.S. always gives to Israel every year in military aid, but additionally, tens of billions of dollars more. So I'm wondering if you could provide your analysis of why you think the U.S. is investing so many resources in supporting Israel while it's clearly committing war crimes.
Well, certainly it is supporting Israel, but it's not supporting Israel because this is a altruistic act. To the United States, Israel is its landed aircraft carrier in the Near East. Israel is the takeoff point for America to control the Near East. And from the very time there was talk of creating an Israel, it was always that Israel was going to be an outpost, first of England, then of Russia, then of the United States in the Near East. And I can give you an anecdote. Netanyahu's main national security advisor for the last few years has been Uzi Arad. I worked at the Hudson Institute for about 5 years, 1972 to 76, and I worked very closely with Uzi there. Uzi and I made 2 trips to Korea and Japan to talk about international finance. So we had a good chance to get to know each other. And on one trip, we stopped over from New York to San Francisco. And in San Francisco, there was a party or a gathering for people to meet us. And one of the U.S. generals came over and slapped Uzi on the back and said, "You're our landed aircraft carrier over there. You know, we love you." Well, I could see Uzi tightening up and getting very embarrassed and didn't really have anything to say. But the United States has always viewed Israel as just our foreign military base. not Israel. So, of course, it wants to secure this military base. But when England first passed the act saying there should be in Israel, the Balfour Declaration, it was because Britain wanted to control the Near East and its oil supplies. When Israel was formed in the United Nations, the first country to recognize it was Stalin and Russia, who thought that Russians were going to have a major influence over Israel. And then after that, of course, when Truman came in the military immediately saw that it was America was replacing England as the chief of the Near East, and that was even after the overthrow of the Mossadegh government in Iran in 1953. So from the United States, it's not Israel's wagging the American tail, just the opposite. You mentioned that America is supporting Israel. I don't think America is supporting Israel at all, nor do most Israelis, nor do most Democrats. America is supporting Netanyahu. It's supporting Likud, not Israel. The majority of Israelis, certainly the non-religious Israelis, the core population of Israel since its founding, is opposing Likud in its policies. So what really is happening is that to the United States, Netanyahu is the Israeli version of Zelensky in the Ukraine. And the advantage of having such an unpleasant, opportunist, and corrupt person as Netanyahu, who is under indictment for his bribery and corruption, is precisely that all of the attention now of the whole world that is so appalled by the attacks going on in Gaza, they're not blaming the United States. They're blaming Israel. They're blaming Netanyahu and Israel for it, when it's the United States that has been sending plane load after plane load of bombs, of guns. There are 22,000 machine guns, automatic guns that are banned for sale in the United States that America is sending for the settlers to use on the West Bank. So there's a pretense of good cop, bad cop. You have Mr. Blinken telling Netanyahu, when you bomb hospitals, make sure you do it according to the rules of war. And when you kill 100,000 Gaza children, make sure it's all legal and in the war. And when you talk about ethnic cleansing and driving a population out, make sure that it's all done legal. Well, of course, it's not the rules of war, and there are war crimes being committed. But the United States is pretending to tell Netanyahu and the Israeli government, use smaller bombs. Be more gentle when you bomb the children in the hospital. When actually this is all for show. The United States is trying to say, well, you know, it's we're only there to give help to an ally. But as the whole world has noticed, that the U.S. now has 2 aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, right off the Near Eastern shore, and it has an atomic submarine near the Persian Gulf. Why are they there? President Biden and Congress says we are not going to have American troops fighting Hamas in Gaza. We're not going to get involved. Well, if the troops are not going to get involved, why are they there? Well, we know what the American planes are doing. Yesterday, they bombed yet another airport and a fuel depot in Syria. They're bombing Syria, and it's very clear that they're there not to protect Israel, but to fight Iran. Again and again, every American newspaper, when it talks about Hamas, it says Hamas acting on behalf of Iran. When it talks about Hezbollah, and is there going to be an intervention from Lebanon against northern Israel. They say Hezbollah and the Iranian puppets. And any time they talk about any Near Eastern leader, it's really that all these leaders are puppets of Iran, just like in the Ukraine and Central Europe, they talk about Hungary and other countries all being puppets of Putin in Russia. Their focus really, America isn't trying to fight to protect the Ukraine. It's fighting for the last Ukrainian to be exhausted in what they'd hoped would be depleting Russia's military. Well, it hasn't worked. Well, the same thing in Israel. If the United States is pushing Israel and Netanyahu to escalate to do something that at a point is going to lead Nasrallah to finally say, okay, we can't take it anymore. We're coming in and helping rescue the Gazians and especially rescue the West Bank, where just as much fighting is taking place. We're going to come in, and that's when the United States will then feel free to move not only against Lebanon, but all the way via Syria, Iraq, to Iran. What we're seeing in Gaza and the West Bank today is only the catalyst, the trigger for the fact that the neocons say we are never going to have a better chance than we have right now to conquer Iran. So this is the point for the showdown, that if America is to control Near Eastern oil, and by controlling Near Eastern oil, by bringing it under the U.S. control, it can control the energy imports of much of the world. And therefore, this gives American diplomats the power to cut off oil and gas and to sanction any country that tries to go multipolar, any country that tries to resist U.S. unipolar control.
Yeah, Michael, I think you're really hitting such an important point, which is how this is one of the most geostrategic regions of the world, especially when it comes to hydrocarbons. The entire global economy is still very heavily reliant on oil and gas, and especially considering the U.S. is not part of OPEC, and especially now considering that OPEC has really expanded essentially to OPEC Plus and now includes Russia. That means that Saudi Arabia and Russia essentially can help control global oil prices. And we've seen this really, in fact, in the United States in the past few years with the rise of consumer price inflation. We saw that the Biden administration was concerned about gas prices, in particular in the lead up to the midterm elections. And the Biden administration has been releasing a lot of oil from the strategic oil reserves of the United States. And we can also see these kinds of statements, in particular, when we go back and look at the Bush administration. There were numerous people involved in the Bush administration and, the so-called war on terror, who openly talked about how important it was for Washington to dominate this region. And I'm really thinking of in 2006, when the top U.S. general and also NATO leader Wesley Clark, he famously disclosed that the Bush administration had made plans to overthrow 7 countries in 5 years. And those were countries in North Africa and West Asia. And specifically, he said the plans were to overthrow the governments of Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again.
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
And since then, we of course saw the U.S. war on Iraq. We of course saw the proxy war in Syria that still goes on in many ways. The U.S. is occupying 1/3 of Syrian territory, including the oil-rich areas. And Trump himself, Donald Trump, boasted that he was leaving U.S. troops in Syria to take the oil.
And then they say he left troops in Syria. You know what I did? I left troops to take the oil. I took the oil. The only troops I have are taking the oil. They're protecting the oil. I took over.
We're taking the oil. We're not taking the oil.
Well, maybe we will. Maybe we won't.
They're protecting the facility.
I don't know. Maybe we should take it. But we have the oil. Right now, the United States has the oil. So they say he left troops in Syria. No, I got rid of all of them other than we're protecting the oil. We have the oil.
We also saw that the U.S. impose sanctions on Lebanon, which contributed to basically hyperinflation and the destruction of the Lebanese economy. And that was largely because Hezbollah is part of the government, and the U.S. has been pressuring the Lebanese government to create a new government without Hezbollah. We also saw, of course, that NATO destroyed the Libyan state in 2011. Somalia also has a failed state, and Sudan was divided in no small part thanks to the U.S. and Israel supporting South Sudan's separatist movement on ethno-religious lines, using religious sectarianism. So if you look at the list of countries that Wesley Clark named in 2006, the 7 countries in 5 years, again, that was Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan. The only country that really has been able to maintain state stability, that has not been completely devastated by the United States, is Iran. And of course, it took longer than 5 years, but the U.S. was pretty successful. And of course, Israel has played an important role in this U.S. goal to destabilize those governments in the region.
Well, let's look and see how this was done. Remember, after America was attacked on 9/11, there was a meeting at the White House, and everybody knew that the pilots were Saudi Arabians, and they knew that some of the pilots had been staying at the Saudi embassy in Los Angeles, I think, in the United States. But after 9/11, there was a cabinet meeting, and Rumsfeld said to the people there, you look and find any link you can get to Iraq. You know, forget Saudi Arabia. We're no problem. We want Iraq is the key. And he directed them to find it. And the 9/11 became the excuse for attacking not Saudi Arabia, but Iraq, and going right on with it. Well, you needed a similar crisis in Libya. They said in Libya there was some, I think, fundamentalists in the suburbs of one of the, not the capital city, that were causing problems. And so you have to protect the innocent people from the religious extremists, and you go in and grab all of their gold reserves, all of their money, and you take over the oil on behalf of France's oil oil monopoly there. Well, this is the role of the fighting in Gaza today. The fighting in Netanyahu's fight against Gaza is being used as the excuse for America moving its warships there, its submarines, and bombing along with Israel the Syrian airport, so that the Syrians are not able to move weapons or any kind of military support either to Lebanon to the west or Iran to the east. So it's obvious that all of what we're seeing is somehow to soften up public opinion for the fact that, well, just like we had to invade Iraq because of 9/11, we have to now finally fight and take out the oil refineries of Iran and their scientific institutes and any laboratories where they may be doing atomic research. And Iran realizes this. Last week, the Iranian press TV said that their defense minister says that if there's any attack on Iran, whether by Israel or by anyone else, the U.S. And its foreign bases are going to be hit hard. Iran, Russia, China have all looked at the Gaza situation not as if it's an Israeli action, but as if it's the U.S. action. They all see exactly that it's all about Iran, and that's the one thing the American press only says when it talks about Gaza or Hamas or Hezbollah or any other group. It's always the Iranian tool, so-and-so. They're demonizing Iran in the same way that the neocons have demonized Russia to prepare for America declaring an undeclared war against Iran.